The tragedy is that a plane has crashed with 65 passengers and 6 crew on board just after it took off from Domodedovo Airport, one of the main airports around Moscow. These are the first pictures back from the site of the crash. The video was apparently shot by locals there. The village where the plane came down is located about 60 kilometres southeast of Moscow from where we're talking to you now. Emergency services really struggling this afternoon, they say, to reach the area there because of the exceptionally heavy snowfall that the whole region's had to encounter over the last week. Bit more detail about the plane. As mentioned, it's an Antonov An-148 owned by the Saratov airline company. Pretty new plane, made its maiden flight back in 2010. The specific model of plane can reach speeds of around 820 kilometres an hour. It's a regional flyer capable of carrying up to 80 passengers on board. Now, Dan, as I say, you're much more fluent in Russian than me. You're across the wires. There's been so much speculation and information coming in over the last 2.5 hours since this has really happened. First thing to say is thoughts, of course, so strongly with the family, the friends, the loved ones of all these poor people that have perished today, the passengers and the crew. We saw a really harrowing shot earlier on. A lot of the family members have been going to Orsk Airport. That was the final destination, about 2.5 hours away from Moscow. And they've also been coming to Domodedovo Airport as well. We saw one man literally howling. He was so terribly upset. There's going to be a lot more of that, of course, I suppose, for these poor people having to come to terms with what's happened this afternoon. Initial information on the ground when this plane went down it's just after 6 in the evening here now, Dan. That plane took off just after 2:30 in the afternoon.
That's right.
Initially, people on the scene there said they saw that plane on fire. So, of course, initial speculation, could it have been some kind of engine failure? Because, of course, it was in that initial climb, wasn't it? It wasn't that high, 6,500 feet or so. It'd be going up to about 30,000 feet or more for this 2-hour, 11-minute average flight that it takes. What's being said? That early days, we know, but what are the theories that are coming to the fore at the moment about what went wrong?
Well, there's been theory after theory. The initial one, of course, being that potential for a mid-air collision with a helicopter. That has now been ruled out, at least by the Russian Postal Service.
Tell viewers about that. Now, that came in about 2 hours ago, and initially it seemed to be almost key, but then it was quickly dismissed. What came in on that, Dan?
Well, eyewitnesses described seeing a large amount of mail and post at the crash site scattered over a wide area, as well as debris from some sort of other aircraft, potentially a helicopter, leading to that speculation that there could have been some sort of interaction, some sort of incident involving a Post of Russia helicopter.
A mid-air collision, potentially. Yeah.
That's what was being said. Now, the Post of Russia have released a statement saying in that region they have no helicopters belonging to them at all. So that was ruled out.
And I suppose a regional flyer like this, Russia's such a huge country, Russia Post, or just to get post to run any kind of mail, depends on planes, depends on flying it around, doesn't it? So I suppose this plane very normally could have been carrying just ordinary domestic post.
Well, the other thing that the Post of Russia confirmed was that there was about 20 kilos of post aboard that plane, and that explains, obviously, that post scattered over the debris area. The latest theory to come in, this is over 4 or 5 minutes ago, was that the pilot requested an emergency landing at Zhukovsky Airport. That's an airport in the southeast of Moscow, very close to that crash site as well. The press service of Zhukovsky Airport, they have now said the pilot did not make contact with them or with Domodedovo, which was where the plane took off from initially. So that
there's
theory,
conflicting information already.
A lot of
we've got
different
on
information coming out right now. Yeah.
Early on, you were looking at flight tracker. So that plane got up to 6,500 feet, whatever, in the initial climb, engines on full thrust. What happened then?
Well, there was a fall of about 300 metres or so very rapidly before the plane again flew upwards to that height of 1,800 before dropping right down and disappearing off radar.
So indicating control problems, major control problems there.
Indeed, and that does fit in with those reports coming in of an exploding engine and with the eyewitness accounts of the plane being on fire as well. As we said, though, a single engine failure isn't usually considered a catastrophic event.
If it's contained, that's the thing. If one of these fan blades snaps off in that time when those engines are given out full whack, the worry is, although in theory it should be very safe, the worry is, and there have been cases of this, fair few cases in the past, that it's uncontained, it goes through a fuel line, hence that might tie in with the fire that we were hearing about, or some kind of explosion. Or it can also go through one of those hydraulic lines as well, although, of course, there are all backup systems. Something majorly, obviously, went wrong here. Well, now, on the scene, very early on, we dispatched our senior correspondent, Murad Gazdiev. He's literally just got to that site in the last half hour or so. Murad, you had to get there to the last I think about a kilometre away from where this plane's gone down now. You can't get any further. I can see the police behind you, and you literally had to walk those 3 kilometres to get to where you are. We can see it's heavy snow there. The rescue teams are having a real problem getting through to that place, that field where that plane's come down tonight, just like you.
Well, this is the issue. Access to the crash site. The crash site itself is about a kilometre or thereabouts behind me, but the plane crashed in a field full of snow, very deep snow. Obviously nobody was clearing that, so the work that they're doing, rescuers now, we know there are about 150 rescuers there, 20 odd vehicles. It's difficult because again of the snow. It is still snowing as well, which might be worsening the situation, but as I say, nobody gets beyond this checkpoint. There are multiple police cordons that are keeping journalists, even local villagers, as well as all civilians out of this area in order to ease the work of rescuers, to give them access to the crash site itself. Again, a kilometre or so behind me. It's getting dark. It's just gotten dark, but I'm sure they'll have the lighting and everything else to continue their work. 65 passengers.
Yeah, there's been no official statement yet, has there, from the emergency rescuers? They obviously got their hands full. You told me earlier on there are 150 rescuers on the scene. There are about 20 engines or ambulances, etc. as well. Just to be clear here, has it been completely ruled out that there are no survivors? Because that's the most crucial thing at this time. The hope is maybe somebody is still alive there, albeit if you land in these conditions and you're injured, the hope isn't good. But is it officially ruled out that everyone's perished on that plane or not?
Kevin, I was just talking to a rescuer that was passing by us. He said no survivors. It's difficult to imagine surviving a crash like this with a jet, flying at hundreds of kilometers an hour, plummeting all but into the ground. The forces here, the momentum, they all but preclude any survivors. 65 passengers, 6 crew members, 71 in all. These rescuers, their colleagues, psychologists, working with relatives of the people that perished in this tragedy in Moscow, in the Orenburg region of Moscow, Orenburg region, which is where this jet was flying to the city of Orsk. They're hard at work, but again, no survivors.
Is there anything, it's getting dark now, as you say, it's making the situation even worse for the rescuers there to try and track the wreckage. Is there any thought about how big the debris site is? Because the investigators are going to be, as we know, looking at that very closely, depending on how the plane broke up. If it broke up in the air, it's likely it'll be a big debris field, might be several kilometres or more. If it impacted the ground pretty much intact, or something like that, it'll be a small debris field. That's apparently really important in the early stages of trying to work out what went wrong. What do you know about the size of the impact site behind you there?
Well, details are still scant. The rescuers and everyone else, they aren't letting much out. They're still... This is the early stages, the early hours. They're trying to sift through the wreckage, trying to see what exactly happened. The size of the crash site, I haven't been told. I haven't heard anything from official sources or rescuers here. But a number of theories have been debunked, such as that there was a mid-air collision with a helicopter. The rescuers here as well, they've issued an official statement, but they've told us they found no evidence, no parts of debris from a helicopter. So that was a mere rumor. The other thing, of course, you were discussing earlier on is that there were reports that the pilot called in technical difficulties immediately after takeoff. The aircraft was in the air for merely minutes, but there were
got a bit more info on that.
Technical difficulties and requested.
Apparently not, Murad. I mean, it's difficult where you are at the scene.
At Zhukovsky Airport.
Yeah, apparently, no, that's been denied by Zhukovsky Airport. They said that's not far from the crash site. They say the reports that a pilot requested an emergency landing at Zhukovsky Airport, the officials there say, is not true. So, again, that's a bit of conflicting information. While you're there, though, because I know it's quite hard for you to be online, we're hearing the emergency ministry now saying that one of those crucial black boxes, those flight data recorders, it may be the data recorder for the tech side, or it could be the other box, the voice data recorder that listens in crucially to what those pilots are saying. It's important they find the two, but apparently the emergency ministry has already said now that they have found one of those black boxes. We don't know which. There's also a line coming through as well now. The emergency ministry is saying that they are now discovering pieces of wreckage. They found at least 2 bodies in the parts of the fuselage there. But, of course, there were many more on that doomed flight, 65 passengers and 6 crew on that flight number 6W703 that departed Moscow Domodedovo International Airport just about 4 hours ago. Just a little bit less than 4 hours ago. Didn't make it too far, was only in the air for about 7 minutes or so. Murad, at the moment, this investigation, this recovery, I suppose it is now, is going to go on, I suppose, throughout the night. What's the thought on it? Are more people going to join there, or what are you hearing?
Well, emergency vehicles and rescuers are still arriving. There are officials as well. Convoys have arrived, as I gather, officials with sirens and convoys of them, in fact. But as for the theories, the investigation itself, the likely causes, well, meteorologists, the Moscow Meteorologist's Office, have issued a statement. They've said that this isn't dramatic weather. This is nothing unusual, and that aircraft operate in this weather all the time. They say that weather as a factor here is highly unlikely to have caused this crash. The other issue, of course, the aircraft itself, Saratov Airlines. Yes.
But, of course, Murad, the question is, was this plane, another thing the investigators will be urgently looking at, was this plane sufficiently de-iced at Domodedovo Airport? Very professional airport. I fly there every week myself. Now, Dan, you've got a bit of news on that. What have you heard? But, again, not confirmed. You got a line in.
Yeah, not confirmed. We did see photos earlier of allegedly the plane being de-iced, covered in that antifreeze liquid, standard procedure probably for planes flying in this condition. We are hearing now the opposite information coming in from sources, unconfirmed, unverified as of yet, that the pilot actually refused for this de-icing procedure, for this de-icing liquid to be put on the plane itself, which is very strange. Yeah, very strange in these weather conditions. But again, that is unconfirmed. Presumably, we'll find that out from the investigation at the site once they look more into this debris and the procedures that took place before takeoff from Domodedovo.
I've flown over many times myself when it's cold weather. I mean, sometimes some of the planes haven't been de-iced because they don't need to be de-iced if there's no moisture in the air, and I think if they've been sitting around not that long, there isn't a need to do that. I'm no expert on it, but I've often questioned myself, gosh, should they have de-iced this? So maybe it was normal, don't know. You don't know how long, if that's a regional plane, maybe it's only touching down for less than an hour at a time before it goes back up, because, of course, they don't want these planes on the ground. They want them in generating money up in the sky. Indeed. So turnaround times are often minimal on these things, aren't they? So rescue operations set to continue round the clock at the site of the crash. Here's what Russia's Ministry of Emergency Situations have had to say thus far.
Firefighter and rescue teams, as well as ambulances, immediately headed to the crash site. Over 150 people and 20 pieces of technical equipment are taking part in recovering what they can from the incident.
Of course, thoughts with the relatives. They've already been gathering at Orsk Airport to try and get a handle on what's happened here, where that plane was expected to land just a couple of hours after it left Moscow. That flight just about 2 hours, 2 hours, 10 minutes or so, in theory. Many of the relatives have understandably been grieving. Our heart goes out to that guy there, literally howling. Horrendous. Emergency services and doctors have been deployed to the airport. They're going to help as best they can, provide psychological and medical help to those coming to terms with the tragedy. Again, even at this stage, I suppose, still hoping against all hope that indeed there may have been some survivors here. It doesn't look good, though, it has to be said. Flights have been suspended, meantime, in the city of Orsk, we can tell you. Here we can see passengers handing their tickets back in. A very sombre mood there, obviously, right now. Medics are also present at the airport. That flight, again, to remind you, if you may have had someone on that flight or know of anyone, friends, family, crew, was flight number Saratov Airlines 6W703, departing Moscow earlier this afternoon, just round about 4 hours ago. It's a little under 4 hours ago. It's now just 6:15 in the evening, Moscow time. Now, shortly after this happened, but details have been changing thick and fast since, I spoke to aviation expert Julian Bray. He explained the plane's technical capabilities here, this Antonov An-148, a combined Russian-Ukrainian developed plane, and the possible reasons for the crash.
It's all pure speculation at the moment. I understand there is some video footage of these parts, and so it could be unrelated, or of course it could actually be carrying created helicopter parts inside the aircraft. The Antonov is a good old workhorse, the Antonov An-148, and so it's, as you say, it's used for mail, it's also used for cargo, and it's widely used inside Russia by their regional airlines. The point is, this is a fairly new aircraft, and the maintenance on it will be fairly straightforward. Where it's flying, there could possibly be a thing they call wind shear, where the wind just suddenly goes straight up and alters the characteristics of the plane. Also, we have to consider whether there's icing, whether they properly de-iced the plane before it left Moscow. It could be that ice built up very quickly on the wings, and that might have affected the flying ability of the plane. It could well be the wind shear, or it could well be that they did actually have a problem with the engines themselves. It could well be that the fuel's iced up, the fuel lines are blocked. There's any number of things that will have to be investigated. It is a very difficult area, I understand, so somehow they've got to get the assets into the area so they can actually properly map out and find out exactly what's happening. Very heavy snow there. I've seen some footage, obviously shot by a local, and already the parts that are shown are completely covered by snow. Sooner or later, the black boxes, which are actually painted bright orange, will appear, and this will give you the data recorder from the flight deck, and we find out exactly what did happen.